What's going on, YouTube chat? Today we're talking about ND filters. In other words, neutral density filters. And what does an ND filter actually do? They're basically sunglasses for your lens. This slaps on straight in front of the camera, or more so in front of the lens, so that you can reduce the amount of light that enters the lens. So let me just show you real quick. So why would you use an ND filter? Typically, you only use an ND filter when it's super bright outside or whenever you want to reduce the amount of light coming through your lens. So there's two topics right here, as a photographer and as a videographer. And we'll start off why photographers would use an ND filter. Photographers can only shoot to a certain speed when it comes to shutter speed. Different type of photographers own different type of cameras. Some cameras shutter speed can go up to 200th of a second when you're using off-camera flash, and some other cameras are able to shoot up to 250th. And when it's really sunny outside and you're using off-camera flash, you're only allowed to go up to 250th of a second depending on the brand of camera that you're using. So this means that even if you crank the shutter all the way up and you're trying to get that bokeh or that blur behind your subject, and you want to drop it down to all the way, for example, let's say 1.8, 1.4, even up to 1.2. Usually if you have like a 50 millimeter or so, your image is going to be just way too bright, super overexposed. And there's two ways to fix this. You can either use an ND filter or you can use high speed sync. If you use high speed sync, you're allowed to manipulate your shutter, crank it up all the way up to 1/8,000th of a second, if I'm not mistaken. But there's two caveats right there. For example, for me, whenever I'm shooting high speed sync, I've seen a shift in white balance, and quote me if I'm wrong, whoever's watching this video, I've noticed that some of my images, white balance tends to shift just a little bit. Sometimes it's a little bit towards the magenta side and a little bit towards the green side. And typically it's when I'm shooting pretty fast. So in order to avoid that, and I've seen my images definitely drastic change whenever I'm using an ND filter, is, for example, one, I'm also able to manipulate the amount of light that comes straight into the lens. And I'm able to just shoot so much faster because of that recycle time of my flash. And two, that white balance shift completely disappears. So since I like to have my settings on manual white balance, manual shutter speed, manual aperture, I just like to have that control over the light and my camera settings. So why do videographers shoot with ND filters? Primarily to have that cinematic look, as we call it, which I really hate using that word because it's just overused. But initially we just like to keep that motion blur. We like to keep it natural as what the human eye actually sees through a video. For example, whenever you're watching a movie, they're always shooting in that 180-degree rule. Whenever you're watching a movie, we're always watching it at a 24 frames per second. To be more specific, 23.976 frames per second. I know I'm probably geeking out on you guys, but just stay with me. In order for us to keep those settings, we put the camera in 24 frames per second to keep that easy for you guys. We have our aperture as wide open or as closed as you want. But whenever it's wide open, it's gonna be super overexposed, especially if you're shooting in outdoors. So the way to control this, the next thing is keeping your ISO low. So once you have your ISO as low as possible and you're still seeing that footage overexposed, that's whenever we use the ND filter. And I'm actually gonna show you how that works. So let's just say right now, this is the sun. What we would do is we would put an ND filter in front of the lens. So what would happen is, for example, all right, so that's what it looks like. And then if I start closing it, you start seeing that it gets darker. And that's open and that's closed. And so what this does is you're able to manipulate your exposure properly, keeping that 180-degree rule. So you're shooting at 24 frames per second, you have your aperture wide open, and you have your ISO super as low as possible as your camera allows you, correct? So this helps you keep that bokeh that you want in the background or of your subject so that the background is super nice and creamy. I've seen a couple people say that it helps you retain detail and color. I may be wrong, but for that, which is a whole nother video, I used polarizer filters, which also helps you remove glare from either windows, cars, buildings, you name it, anything that's basically reflective, water. And there's a bunch of ND filters out there. I've actually tried so many and I've gotten rid of most of them, but there's one specific brand that I vouch for, and that is Polar Pro. By the way, I am not sponsored or nobody paid me to promote these. I'm just here trying to help you guys as always. And specifically, my boy Peter McKinnon. I've been rocking these ND filters since they came out, and a lot of people have different opinions. I personally love my ND filters. I have so many ND filters, one for each of my cameras. I absolutely love them. They tend to never come off my camera when I'm shooting video. So I hope that helps you guys decide either to buy an ND filter or not. But a lot of people, they tend to just crank that shutter only because either one, they don't know how to use an ND filter, they're lazy, they want that cinematic look, but they just rather just crank that shutter. But like I said, to finish off this video, in other words, they're basically just sunglasses for your camera. So I hope that this video helped. If you guys liked this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you guys have an Instagram, if you guys want to follow me on my Instagram, I'll put it right here down below. So like I said before, you guys, I am trying to do my best to reach my first 500 followers. So if you guys haven't followed already, please also consider hitting that subscribe button. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.